old for video games?
You have failed.
The same way, I will destroy you. And my friend is truly dead.
Now this is pod racing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Jedi Council Chambers. I am Urza Master. Joining me as always, Lord Uther and Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. We are the Graying Jedi Podcast. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hello there.
Today, we go back to the world of the Mandalorian in the galaxy far, far away as we take a look at the very fine release that is known as the Heiress in Season 2 of Mandalorian from Disney+. And for those of you who don't have Disney+, who've never seen The Mandalorian, highly encourage you to go out, get yourself a Disney+ subscription. We're not even sponsored, but this is my pitch to Disney. We will talk you up because we, the Graying Jedi, have watched many an hour of Star Wars on this platform. And let me tell you, this episode is fantastic. Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, why don't you hit us up with some of that background knowledge from the sacred texts of the Jedi Council Hall?
Thank you, Jedi Master Urza Master. Thank you, Jedi Master Lord Uther. And thanks to you all, Graying Jedis, Padawans, Sith, apprentices, chancellors, and all of you in the Old and New Republic. We have returned with Chapter 11, The Heiress, which first aired again during the Dark Times, November 13th, 2020. It is the third episode of the second season. And we have some returning champions. Bryce Dallas Howard, Ron's daughter, has returned to direct her second episode for Lucasfilm. You will recall that she directed Chapter 4 of Season 1, titled Sanctuary, in which we were introduced to the character of Cara Dune, and they tussled with a ATST walker and protected some villagers who were harvesting blue krill. So she is back. And Jon Favreau, of course, is our screenwriter, showrunner for this episode. We have a lot of new faces and a couple of returning ones joining the cast this week. None so valuable and, if I may, beautiful as Katie Sackhoff. This was Starbuck in the Battlestar Galactica revival on the Sci-Fi Channel about a decade ago. And she was introduced into Star Wars in 2011 by Dave Filoni when he cast her as the vocal talent of Bo-Katan Kryze, who is heir to Mandalorian privilege and royalty. In fact, in the animated series, her sister was the regent of Mandalore when it was still an independent and prosperous world. Satine Kryze ruled Mandalore and actually harbored affections for Obi-Wan Kenobi in that animated series. And although they never consummated any form of relationship, because Obi-Wan was faithful to his Jedi Order vows, Satine declared her love for him in a moment after she had been cut down by Darth Maul. And if none of this sounds familiar to you, go back and check out the Clone Wars animated series, season, I want to say perhaps season 4 or 5, and you will see the Mandalorian saga from Mandalore, and like I said, Bo-Katan's sister and Obi-Wan carrying on a forbidden Anakin Padme style will they or won't they relationship. So Katie Sackhoff, who did the voice in the animated show, has been cast in the live action, which is always great when you can get your talent to double up. Sometimes they will move in a completely different direction. In this case, she was able to do it. We also had guest appearances from Mercedes Varnado, who many of you will remember as a WWE character with blue hair called Sasha Banks. In this case, she is playing Casca Reeves. Her hair is not so blue, but her armor is. and she's one of the Mandalorian wingmen with Bo-Katan. And also Simon Kassandidas. It's very Greek. I apologize, Simon. He plays Axe Wolves, another terrific Star Wars name. And together they make the trio of Mandalorians introduced on this planet of Trask. We also have Misty Rojas, who has played everything from an Ugnaught to a Frog Lady. She returns as the Frog Lady character in this episode. And we have Giancarlo Esposito making his first return this season as Moff Gideon, evil Imperial baddie. And we have Titus Welliver, who you might recognize from Amazon series Bosch, as well as a host of other television shows and so forth. But he does play Harry Bosch, based on Michael Connelly's best-selling detective series. He gets to play the one of the Imperials who come under fire from Din Djarin and his fellow Mandalorians. So that's who made it. And basically this episode is right where we left our heroes in a pickle at the end of chapter 10. The Razor Crest is basically in pieces, and it limps down for a splashdown landing. Terrific special effects work early as it ends up in the drink and ends up being repaired a little shabbily by some Mon Calamari dockmen, which makes for a nice visual gag at the end of the episode. You can tell it's a Bryce Dallas Howard episode. She does take a moment to step away from the action and the FX to give us some character interaction. And the reunion of the Frog Lady and her husband on the planet's surface is very touching. And we get some new shadings with the child and those eggs that he keeps pilfering when no one's around. We get a nice little segment in the frog couple's home where the child learns that, hey, they're delicious, but they're also part of the family. So that was good. This whole episode had kind of a Kevin Costner 1995 Waterworld vibe. Whether it was just the whole, with the catamarans sort of set on the water, and sort of there was a lot of rope and nets, and they even have at one point Din Djarin, like he's trapped in a water tank, and there's a gate caged keeping him in, and he's kind of trying to fight his way out of it, much like Kevin Costner's character Mariner does in Waterworld. I just got a little bit of a vibe from it. If Bryce Dallas Howard leaned into the Magnificent Seven and the Seven Samurai for her first episode, here you could see some influences as well. We had Mon Calamari characters. We had Quarren, who were the action figures in the old Star Wars Kenner pegs were called squid heads. We had Grogu trying to enjoy a bowl of chowder and then getting a little face hugger jump onto his face, making for a great, again, Pedro Pascal's vocal delivery, very dry, and we'll talk about that more in future episodes, where he can sell the joke, again, by not making it seem like a joke, but as he just looks down at him and says, hey, don't play with your food. And he just delivers that with just the right amount of terseness and parental disapproval, but it's hysterical when you hear him say it, as Grogu is looking up at him like, what? I didn't do anything. We've got good fight sequences. We've got some backstory on Din Djarin, that his fanaticism about removing his armor and his helmet, that's not the prevailing wisdom of the Mandalorian culture. Apparently he is more of a isolated sect called the Children of the Watch, or the Child of the Watch, more of a religious cult, bordering on zealotry. So, it kind of, it starts the conversation about perhaps he doesn't necessarily align with what a Mandalorian, a modern Mandalorian might look like, or want to how to do it there. And has he been sort of brainwashed by the armorer and the fellow Mandalorians? As you know, so it opens up the door to some interesting discussions. His Beskar does take a beating in this episode, but it clearly holds up. So you see why it's so valuable galaxy wide. And we have little bits from the animated series and so forth, other Dave Filoni style projects that Jon Favreau and he are working in. Another reference to the Darksaber, which we last saw Moff Gideon cutting himself out of a ruined TIE fighter with. And our first off-screen on-screen reference to an off-screen character, Ahsoka Tano. And longtime Graying Jedi fans know we've already covered a good slice of Ahsoka Tano in this era, in her self-named television show Ahsoka. Go ahead and click subscribe and make sure you go back and check all those episodes of Ahsoka and Sabine, Grand Admiral Thrawn, Professor Wang, Carson Teva, and so forth. But gentlemen, just your overall thoughts on, again, just a very professional, very polished. I know that Jedi Master Lord Uther has said this along. It felt to me, again, like a video game, not necessarily in how it was shown to us, but the idea that, okay, by going to this location and fulfilling these missions or needs, then you acquire knowledge or pieces of the puzzle that will then benefit you down the road. So, and very much like that, it's kind of a standalone episode in a box, but yet it leaves breadcrumbs to bring us further down the narrative as we go. So, what did you guys think of the Heiress?
I loved it. I thought this was, an interesting vehicle episode. It felt very much like a train heist. Certainly, I picked up on the Waterworld references in there. I loved that because Waterworld was one of my favorite. I loved Kevin Costner movies. I mean, growing up in the 90s, how could you not? Dances with Wolves, Waterworld, The Postman, all great stuff. But this was just such a cool thing. Just from the jump, you got this feeling that something was awry. Like, it felt a little convenient. It starts out, the frog lady meets her frog man. Everything seems to be okay with the exception of the ship falling in the harbor. And it's like, is this going to be like Pirates of the Caribbean where it's kind of hokey and silly? And then it's sort of, you get that flash of, the hooded figure in the crowd. And it's like, ooh, this could get a little bit interesting. Then you get some goofiness with the chowder and the little thing on Grogu's face. And I really like that, it hits you with a bit of a left hand in that, you realize there are Mandalorians out there that don't follow this strict sort of religious way, and it gives you this new depth. And I mean, the touch of Bryce Dallas Howard here really shows nicely. I think she does a fantastic job with telling sort of what could almost be seen as like Shyamalan-esque twists, where like, wow, this is a huge out of left field thing. There are Mandalorians that don't follow the way, and then they're sort of renegade, but they're like the ruling class, and actually, this is some religious sect. Like, that's a huge curveball, but it feels very natural and canonical and not like convenient at all, which I think it could easily have felt like under potentially another director. And the cool like approach of making this like a heist that keeps, getting weirder or keeps getting more complicated for Mando is a really neat way of, showing us kind of Mando on his own. We've had the child along for so many episodes in a row now, and now he just sort of gets to stay at home with the babysitter. Like, I found it very refreshing. Like, it had like those elements of humor that grounded you, but it also had intrigue and action and, I mean, frankly, sex appeal. Is this an attractive young woman Mandalorian? Like, that could have easily gone, under some directors or some art directions in a very sort of non-Star Wars-y way. A little more slave Leia as opposed to the strong Leia that we all know and love. And they kept it very much on the level. I don't want to say like family friendly, but definitely to the point where like you felt that they were really respecting Star Wars without, compromising the fact that these are, individuals of not just, visual attraction, but like you like them as like, badass women out there doing incredible things, trying to piece back their whole civilization. And there's only 3 of them, and granted, only 2 of them are female, but, it's just like this whole, and they're taking on shades of the Empire, so again, it brings you back to sort of the roots of Star Wars. So for me, it was like, it was a perfect, storm in a bottle captured on a water world, which was even better. So I was enthralled pretty much the entire time. I did love like the cheeky like ending where everything's sort of tied together with ropes.
Yes.
It's like, this is the best you could do for 1,000 credits. Fantastic, just absolutely fantastic.
I think we're pretty lucky that we can have the voice actors actually step into these roles. Am I coming across okay, or am I too loud?
Oh, no.
Okay, just making sure. All right. My powerful voice, you never know. But anyway, so when Katie Sackhoff could just step right in to the role that she was voicing from the show, from Clone Wars, right? Was it Clone Wars?
Clone Wars, yep.
That she was in? Yeah. Yeah. So for her to be able to do that, I think just adds that depth to it, makes it fit in a little bit more. Like Urza Master said, makes that canon, makes it feel like canon. Like it's the way it should be. And anyone that hasn't seen Battlestar Galactica this last time around and seen her play Starbuck, which I didn't think that was going to work, but her in that role, she is just BA the whole way. I mean, she has that tough side to her, that aura of leadership and I'm going to kick your butt kind of thing, and she pulls it off perfectly, which we're going to have to do a Battlestar Galactica podcast at some point because utterly amazing to be able to see that. I'm going to fast forward, though. I'm going to go to the end of the episode, and we know what's going to happen down the road, but when I first saw the end of that episode, I had 2 thoughts. So spoiler alert, everyone. I thought it was either Moff Gideon cloning himself and trying to add some of the child's midichlorians to him, or I thought it was the Palpatine experiment. I really did. So those are my 2 thoughts there, and then we're going to find out, again, spoiler alert, it's not going to go in that direction, but it was like we said, and I've said this a few times, to me it was a D&D side quest that plays into the overarching storyline, right? He did his few things. He met up with another group that he hopefully meets up again with later on. Total setup there. And at the end, we see how he's picking up the breadcrumbs as he goes along. So completing the side quest, getting the information he needs, it unlocks the next part of the game or the next part of the story, and he can keep moving on. So, again, just excellent, wonderful episode.
And you would be hard-pressed, you really would, just to take this episode in and of itself and say, was this made for television and streaming? Or was this something that first aired on the big screen and now you're catching up on it because you never made it out to the multiplex? You can't tell. I mean, to its credit and its shame, science fiction television has evolved since the late 1960s with another program we like to talk about here at Pending Rebrand, Star Trek, on our Warp Core podcast. Make sure you're subscribed and you're also checking out our run through of all things Trek. But I mean, again, they had to evolve special effects and storytelling over time. And it looks much different than it does in the modern era. And, Star Wars was not really a candidate for series television, whether network or cable or anything else, during those first 30, 35, 40 years of the franchise, because they couldn't figure out a way to tell the same type of stories with the same type of things that Star Wars fans have come to, become accustomed to and sort of expect. But you look at this here, you look at Bryce Dallas Howard's work on this episode, and like I say, you'd be fooled when that Razor Crest, plummets to the planet in a fiery ball and then manages to level off just above the platform. Everything looks fine, and then splash. I mean, I have seen far worse effects on the big screen from other would-be blockbuster titles than what I saw in the 3 minutes of episode 3, chapter 11 of The Mandalorian season 2. So it's really, we are fortunate and lucky that effects and storytelling have gotten us to this point, because now it's basically indistinguishable from anything you could ask to be delivered to, out in the mainstream on the big screen.
I think that's a great point. So I'm going to ask you guys this question, because it took me a second. As I was thinking about the question, but I think I have the answer in my head at least. But I'm going to throw it to you guys first. What is the first TV series that you feel truly upped their game to the point of you can't tell, in a sense, if it's TV or movies? Because we talk about Picard season 3. I'm sorry, I've been watching, because I got it on 4K, and I've been watching it on my big screen TV, and I feel like I'm at the movie theater, right? I mean, the sound, the visual effects, they are sparing no expense, and we've been seeing it with the Star Wars stuff too. Obviously, it started somewhere else. So what do you think the first series is that kind of brought that about?
Go ahead, Urza Master. I have my theory.
I have one too, but
Okay.
I mean, I think I have to give it to you a couple different avenues. Frankly, I think Star Trek did this with the Next Generation. I think some of their, now not quite right off the bat, but as they hit their stride in midway through the run, season 3, season 4, I think they were really more cinematic with what they did, probably because they had bigger budgets. It was very popular. That being said, I think the scale you're talking about really didn't come around until like HBO started making, television shows. Maybe The Sopranos, or something similar. In terms of sci-fi, though, I'd like to say Stargate SG-1, honestly, because that came out of a movie, and then the sequel movie ended up being like their first 2 episodes. So they sort of broke it down from there, but it really felt cinematic in a lot of ways. But I think a lot of those sci-fi shows of the late 90s and early 2000s aimed at being more cinematic. I think of a special favorite of mine, Lex, was really great. But it had the scale of a movie contained in 30-minute episodes, or maybe they were an hour long. I don't remember. It's been a long time. But shows like that, which really didn't have tremendously large budgets, they just had really savvy technicians doing computer animation, I think.
From a science fiction standpoint, to answer the question, I would agree with Jedi Master, Urza Master. I would say Deep Space Nine was probably the first time, as Star Trek was maturing. I think Deep Space Nine, right from the jump, sort of had that scale of effects work and everything, and you didn't feel like I was watching just blatant CGI type of stuff. And they had the big sets, and they had a lot of costumes and new aliens, and so I think Deep Space Nine in the science fiction realm. But if you're talking about indistinguishable from television to movies, I think, again, echoing HBO, you can go further back than The Sopranos. I think Tales from the Crypt, which was launched by feature filmmakers like Walter Hill and Robert Zemeckis and action producer Joel Silver, and they would recruit directors and writers and people from the film world to kind of do these 30-minute horror. Some of them were terrifying, some of them were darkly tongue-in-cheek funny, sometimes both in the same 30 minutes. But I think any one of those could have been positioned as a film short, or something that had, the actors, we had Kyle MacLachlan and Billy Zane and all these people that we were used to seeing elsewhere show up for these things. And I think beginning in 1989, I think Tales from the Crypt would be where I would push that there.
Anytime I hear Billy Zane's name said, The Phantom, severely underrated movie. I'm just going to say that right now.
Yes, I'm glad you did.
That's right, because that was a phenomenal film. And then I'm going to go. To me, it's Battlestar Galactica, and I'm going to hear the Adama maneuver is one of the greatest things I've ever seen in TV or movies. But just whether with a FTL as they're almost towards the ground and they just jump out of there, I think that was great. All the battles were very cinematic. So I'll just stick with the sci-fi side of it for me. And to me, it was a Battlestar Galactica seemed to be that next level type of stuff. And again, it's not a knock against, and I agree with you guys, like Star Trek Next Gen, DS9. I just don't know if the technology was fully there yet, but still wonderful, of course, because
Sure.
that's what we do here. So,
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, the scope and scale of this episode, the ushering in of a new team of Mandalorians to the Mandalorian, deserves its ratings and colors of lightsabers. And I defer, as usual, to Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. How do you rate the Heiress?
Well, I'm feeling charitable, and it is a season of giving, so we're going to go with a light sage green St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital form there. It's good for the children, and if they are suffering from forms of cancer and the like, of course, parents never have to pay for treatment, housing, or food, or so the commercials tell us. But this one deserves a light shade of foresty green. Overall, we make only modest gains down the path to reuniting the child with his home race. And as Jedi Master Lord Uther said, we get breadcrumbs, but they are delicious panko breadcrumbs. And they want us to continue down the path to see where this next chapter will reveal. So we're good for green here for the Heiress.
I'll go next. I'll go also a light green, but scratch pad, notepad green. Great episode. Eventually gets us to where we're supposed to be. And again, to me, the real pivotal point is at the end where you're not sure what Moff Gideon is cooking inside of those tubes. And that is the one thing I love about this episode is it does not give it away. It makes you think what's going to happen down the line.
Absolutely. It's a vehicle episode for me, so it is a blue natural 20 D20, but it's sparkly blue, and in the right lighting, a little bit of green. So I really enjoyed it. It introduced Bo-Katan in a big way for me, and I really fell in love with her character in this episode. Later, she becomes even more of a favorite of mine, but I don't want to spoil anything. So, my fellow Jedi Council members, we will wait to discuss more Bo-Katan, but we follow Mando back out into the galaxy far, far away. Until next time, from the Jedi Council, myself, Lord Uther, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, may the Force be with you.
And also with all of you.